Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome for another lovely conversation on being polyvagal informed and all things polyvagal. Today, I'm quite delighted and excited to be speaking with Courtney Rolfe, and I never knew that did I pronounce your last name right?
100% right. Yep.
Perfect. Okay. So Courtney is a clinical psychotherapist and also assistant in training on polyvagal theory. And I'm quite honored to be part of the team that Courtney and Amy have on the Dev Dana's and Foundation of Polyvagal Informed Practice. And excited to share this space with you, Courtney.
Yeah, really glad to be here. I'm
Yeah.
always up for a conversation about polyvagal. I
I
eat, breathe, sleep, live polyvagal.
Yeah, I think I do this conversation more for myself and for the viewers who would be
Yeah.
watching. And we talked about what would we have as a focus on this conversation prior. And I think we settled on safety because we cannot speak more on safety. And I'm realizing it's quite a fairly new concept for many people of what is safety. And I have been asked, what's this thing about safety that everyone is talking about? Is it a new trend? Is it a new thing? And it was like, we now know more about the nervous system and know more about trauma and what is real safety. And so from a polyvagal lens and your clinical practice, how do you see safety and why it's important?
Yeah, the topic of safety, it's going a lot of different directions, this idea of safety as well. I think when I talk about safety, I usually talk about it as autonomic safety. So through the polyvagal lens, I use the words autonomic safety because I think when we just use the word safety, we go to the kind of physical harm threat or the very explicit threats to our safety. And I guess that could be, our physical safety, but also threats to our personal integrity or threats to our autonomy, things like that. And when we're talking about the nervous system and we talk about safety, I think what we're talking about is the response our nervous system has when the threat goes beyond just physical harm or something really explicit and obvious, right? Our nervous system has these responses when something happens or there's an interaction or an exchange or something, and we get our survival our survival states engaged and online, and we move into a survival state. And so I think safety through that lens of what is my nervous system doing, and can I use that to assess my own sense of safety in the world?
Because I see in different contexts, whether it's yoga practice, kind of conscious dance, or anything, there's always this, oh, this is a safe place. My always the thing that comes up, and maybe that's based on my own training or what a safe space is I feel like a bit of like, how do you know this is a safe space?
Right. Who gets
Like,
to say that?
it's very relative, and especially if we're going to look at it from a polyvagal lens, there's a lot of, and bringing in your reception, there are things that might have that I'm not consciously aware of that. And I think that also the layer of how we grew to, override all the time of thinking, oh, it's not a big deal. It's not that we've learned to override our own responses.
Right. Your system is saying there's danger or threat here, and yet we can't get enough explicit pieces to back it up. And so what do? We suppress, override, ignore. Yeah.
That makes it also, when someone says, oh, this is a safe place, is like, I personally much prefer to say safe enough. So as if I'm like facilitating something, I will try and make it safe enough. So how do you see that, like having a safe space from that lens? Because we really, even as I'm not a therapist, but you are, we can't 100% guarantee because there's so many different things that come up. How do you see
Yeah.
that safe space?
It sounds like it would make more sense for people to say we have an intention of creating safety in this space, right?
Yeah.
So that there's a little room for nobody's got it figured out for every single nervous system that exists out there.
Yeah.
I know, and we talked a lot about it in our training cohort about how do we create autonomic safety for everybody. And I guess I had a direction. It's going to come back to me. There's so many directions to go with this, so that one will come back. But yeah, creating a safe space, making a declaration that it's a safe space probably already isn't super safe for most people, because if we make a declaration that we've gotten a safe space created or something like that, we're not even acknowledging the limitation of our own experience, that it may be safe for me in this body, in this circumstance. And my awareness is absolutely going to be limited because that's the human condition. My experience is my experience, and it can't be another experience. And so automatically I've got blind spots and limitations in what somebody else's experience may be, and especially autonomic safety. So it sounds like, even as you're talking about it, sounds like even somebody saying this is a safe space is a cue of danger to your system. like automatically.
And that's what makes the topic is quite complicated, I think, because there's different layers of it. And also, like, we all get, it's autonomic, so we all get this, because sometimes it's like I would notice a threat, or what I perceived as threat or response, to be exact.
Yeah.
And it, because someone said something that, or I tried to kind of speak and I couldn't find my unmute, or something that would elicit that response. But of course, there's quite I think there's a trust of flexibility of nervous systems, like noticing this is what is going on and coming back, instead of creating a story where it tells me, oh, this is not, I'm not coming back. And I know it's kind of, yeah.
Well, it sounds like you're talking about, Deb Dana talks about the discerning question, or the discernment question, when we're talking about neuroception. So with neuroception, there's a detection of something, not an awareness or perception, but what we're trying to do in this work is we're trying to bring perception to that nervous system response, that detection and then response. And then we get to use discernment, right? Then we get to take stock of what's going on around us. And I think the discernment question is something like, in this time, in this place, with these people, is this nervous system response not appropriate, but what I need? Is this response what's needed right now?
Yeah.
And I think that's really, empowering for people who are navigating the world. And in a world where there has been a lot of unsafety, particularly for various populations, there's more unsafety for certain populations in different, countries, areas, parts of the world. Having that discernment, I think, is going to maybe normalize a nervous system experience that's activated just by certain circumstances, and then allow maybe a little bit of empowerment of, do I need this nervous system response or not? Like, do I need to, maintain this level of activation for my protection if I can notice who's around me and maybe what those cues are that my system responded to? Or do I get to maybe sort of play with shifting out of it and regulating and kind of expanding the ability to stay regulated, even with cues of threat? Because that discernment is going to help us decide, is this a danger, Or is this like a signal of like, be aware, something is familiar in this, be aware. So I think that that's a powerful place for this idea of safety to go, and neuroception and discernment.
Yeah. And what comes to mind is in reality, in your clinical practice, when you're with a client, whether online or in person, what are you doing consciously as a professional, as a, to create that safety?
Yeah.
Not just saying, because I've seen
like saying this is a safe space.
Yeah,
you're
because
in therapy.
I've been in spaces where and of course now I look at the world with a polyvagal lens, and where the practitioner or the facilitator would say, oh, this is a safe place, and I'm detecting, I'm feeling there's a lot of kind of things that are not quite right. So it how does it go from just saying it as a word to creating that really safe space? And you might not even say it to your client, oh, this is a safe place, but someone would come and sit in your presence and say, and feels like, oh, this is a person that I could, tell my deepest, kind of ugliest stories.
Yeah, the number one thing that I think of is I need to be aware of my own nervous system. I cannot create safety for anybody in the therapy office or outside of it. I cannot create autonomic safety for anybody if I don't have a regulated nervous system. So my ability and ongoing, forever work of tracking my own system, noticing the body responses that tell me, like just now, right, my shoulders are up. Okay, why don't we drop the shoulders? Like noticing, staying in my body, staying in myself, connected to myself is going to give me the information about where's my nervous system. And that's number one. Because if that doesn't come first, then it doesn't matter what I can put candles and lighting and use a soft voice. None of that matters if my nervous system is communicating survival to my client, which is not a conscious process. It's not I can drop my voice into something really quiet, but there are going to be a million ways my nervous system is going to communicate, either sympathetic activation or dorsal shutdown, no matter what I do with my voice. And so being really, really aware of it and knowing what I need. And if I'm not able to regulate myself in that moment by naming the danger that my system is responding to, and then doing what I need to do, take a breath, feel my feet on the floor, whatever it is, then I need to name it. Because if I just go forward and I've got a survival state nervous system that's communicating to my client that I'm in a survival state and I don't name it, that's when the story comes in. Yeah. So that's where I'm fairly known, at least in our group, of like just narrating my nervous system journey moment to moment.
And I've seen you do that in the training. And I think that also, now reflecting on it, I think that brings it also a level of, oh, you're a human too. It's like, oh, and I remember one of the things that I've found challenging is, when I'm having a train of thought and the word doesn't come up. And Bonnie Bainbridge Going, I don't know if you know her, but she's like a big, an elder in the embodiment world. And I've seen her, she really gave me that shift of, oh, I was going to say something and I can't find the word. And the way she said it, I felt that in my nervous system's like, oh, what is that? Right. And I think, like, so I started to do that and naming it. Oh, I can't find the right word, instead of feeling that kind of response of tension in myself. Is like, oh my goodness, I can't find the word. And with naming it, it feels like, oh, these people are human. My therapist is a human as well.
Yeah. There's a joining. There's a joining in humanity in that, right?
And because no matter how much we want to give that impression of Oh no, I'm fine. Like you said, the nervous system communicate in so many ways
Yeah.
that,
Well, we know as therapists now that we're polyvagal informed, right? Any polyvagal informed therapist knows we can't fake it with our client. Like that does not work. We know too much to even try it. If I try to fake it, I'm just creating so much more rupture and so much more unsafety in the room. And how can you get to a place of trust if somebody's telling you one thing and all this other information is being communicated? So you're telling me everything's fine, yet my nervous system is kind of going bonkers, or I'm finding myself pulling away. There is a disconnect happening. And, of course, that's going to affect the relationship, right? And then the stories that we come up with about it. So, well, I lost my train of thought. Look at that. Well,
well, I've noticed myself now, and I think the more we kind of befriend and use Deb Dana's word, which is lovely, befriend my nervous system. I'm much aware of my nervous system, and my nervous system is much more aware of other people.
yes.
But
Yeah.
and I noticed that when I go into these survival states, like you said, I'm detecting something that is not right, or the person is telling me they're fine, and something in me feels that it's not fine. Usually, my first go-to when I'm on survival is that judgment. It's either to myself. It's like, oh, what's wrong with me? Well, why am I, all these stories that are all about judgment, or the other person's like, oh, we can go on all the judgments that there is. And when someone names it, it's like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. It gives me a validation as a listener, as a client of, yeah, that response that I had, which I wasn't sure what it is, it came from something. Now it feels like
Yeah. Yeah,
disappear.
slowing down and asking the question is it's new for a lot of people, I think. Like we're tuning in to this experience that rarely gets named and rarely gets seen in another person's experience. And so to even just pause and check in on how one's nervous system is doing is, oh yeah, there's a whole different like thing happening here in the room. And continuing to bring that into the room is a very different experience than just staying in narrative the whole time. There's resonance in having our nervous system experience be seen and heard and contained or held and accepted, right? So if I'm in whatever activated or shut down state, being allowed to just be that and not have pressure to, oh, well, you got to calm down, or, you got to resource and not, it's not okay to be there. And that's where we get to change some stuff for people too, is can we just make some space for it and then kind of figure out what's needed? Is there a reason we want to stay there and get curious, or is there, some space to resource? But it's not because the survival states are bad, right? Like, which is
I think that's a very important topic. I had something else, a comment in mind, but I think that this is really important because I think with the world that we live in of that kind of, yeah, this is good. Being angry is not good. Positive and negative emotions. This is, it's in so many levels of wanting to make something good something bad, and
yeah.
it's almost the opposite of the human experience of going through all of that. And it's like, sympathetic and dorsal are bad guys, and we want to avoid them as much as possible, is something that we need to get out of.
Yeah. And I mean, I get, sometimes people's sympathetic and dorsal experiences can be so big, or they can get stuck for so long that then there's a neuroception of danger at the little inkling of a pull toward either one or both of those states. And so I think, this is where Deb's language of like the befriending the nervous system is so crucial, because when we can shift that understanding into that appreciation of what our system is trying to do protective wise, and how it does what it does, and how effective it's been at protecting us. It just, that alone allows us to break out of this good, bad, right, wrong,
Oh yeah.
acceptable, unacceptable kind of mind frame.
Yeah, it's and sympathetic and dorsal is essential for life.
Absolutely.
We can't be sitting and having this
We're all here. Yeah.
without my dorsal kind of regulating the breathing and doing
Right.
all the things that my body needs to do, and my sympathetic, because I'm sitting up and engaging with you. None of
Yep.
thing that we can do. It's just coming back. I have recently been finally, after more like, and I keep talking about this in so many different ways, but I have that I'm dyslexic after being in school for 40 years, and it's like just like 2 months ago I've got that, and
Wow.
just through a conversation, it's like, oh, now I feel safe with my brain, really.
Wow.
That's I was having another polyvagal informed conversation. And that's like, yeah, instead of going against, and now I think when you said that's like, yeah, I'm befriending my brain.
Right.
It's such a nice thing to be able to say, oh, so this is how it's working. This is how it's been
Yeah.
working for all this long.
So it's
And
like creating safety within your own experience in a way. If we
yeah,
tie it into the safety, like your brain is now, it's your body is safer to inhabit just by making peace with this, this process that you didn't understand.
and just added a more layer of safety, and brought me into how it's an inner safety of how we feel
Yeah.
safe with understanding how our body works, because
Mhm.
safety and it's inside, outside, and between.
Mhm.
And I think
Yeah.
this inside is, at least for me now, it's adding another layer of
Mhm.
how we could befriend our and feel
Mhm.
safety in our own systems from the
Mhm.
inside. I don't think that's, I did not hear it enough. Maybe I wasn't ready to hear it. But is that, and I'm sure it's much more difficult for when something is kind of not going right in the way that the world sees it.
Meaning.
Meaning, if like something like people who have like something that they're born with, as
Mm.
even from an organ perspective, like a
Mhm.
failure or of something, or the at the
Mhm.
heart, it has been someone's born with a certain kind of
Mhm.
cardiovascular system or something on
Mhm.
that sort, even from a simple, so what we would call diseases or medical
Mhm.
conditions.
Mhm.
I think that would be a much more difficult, or much more to befriend when
Mhm.
things are not working well. And I could be simplified, even if we're having a cold.
Mhm.
How can I, my system inside is going, "Ah, there's something wrong, and we need to kind of do that." How could safety in our own nervous system? I'm talking about that, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness.
What's really interesting, you kind of reminded me, this might be a little divergent, but long before I had encountered any nervous system, polyvagal, anything of the such, but I was a psychotherapist at the time, and I have had this sort of recurrent back pain pretty much my whole life since adolescence, and a couple different reasons for it. But I have a wonderful, lovely cousin who is a physical therapist, which I think in the UK is like physiotherapist. I'm not sure, but a physical therapist, but she really focuses on the brain
Mm,
and the brain's communication to the body. And so she kind of enlightened me on some of the research around pain and the experience of pain, and so I think that was probably my first little dabble into nervous system regulation, even though I didn't realize that's what I was doing, and starting to differentiate a feeling of pain from the fear response that came after it,
mm,
because the fear response that came after it is the thing that caused all the problems, actually. So the pain itself is just a signal. It's just a feeling. And then what would happen is this cascade nervous system response of sympathetic activation, which then would tighten all the muscles and increase the heart rate and make everything tense. And it just made the pain 1,000 times worse. And so when I was able to start differentiating that, and I think I was really using mindfulness a lot. I was learning mindfulness and be able to sort of quell the sympathetic response and just let the pain be there. I'm not discounting people have pain conditions that I can't even. This is just my own experience with this one very specific pain that I had. But it was really, really amazing that the nervous system regulation that I was doing changed my this has been a lasting change. I mean, this is 10 years now that I've been able to consistently really not experience the same sort of cycle of pain that I was in for a long time. So
Yeah,
think of that.
Because I'm taking it to even as simple when you're walking and stub your toe or something hits, and I'm like you said, and I kind of did not connect it to the nervous system until now that you're talking about it. If I keep saying, "Oh my goodness, this hurts," it kind of really
activating.
activating. But if I'm just sitting and like, "Oh yes, this is hurt," and kind of staying with it, breathing, and kind of I think not going into the story and of that cascade of things, it lasts less longer. I don't, and it's quite interesting. I don't know much about how we perceive pain, but I know that if we're gonna stay with it, it's gonna feel a lot more than it actually is. Which it's fascinating. These different layers. So I think that's even befriending the body and how our responses to different things makes it a lot easier. Not simple, not
simple,
not easy in doing. I think because we have been conditioned I think this is a flip side, or going a kind of different from the world that we live in, of kind of valuing challenge, valuing pain, valuing struggle. And I know this could go to a completely different conversation, so I'll bring it back.
Well, what I was thinking is, it's kind of a perfect highlight of how, Polyvagal is bringing our, or any of these embodied mind-body awareness, these embodiment, focuses, practices, somatic practices, where we're just learning and being able to use more and more what we're learning about the fact that this physical health and mental, emotional health are not siloed the way we've grown up to believe, and the way we've thought for so long, and the way still a lot of people and practitioners, including medical practitioners, still are kind of functioning in this siloed kind of way, as if here we're just talking about we're talking about bumping your elbow, and that there's a nervous system response, and that's emotion regulation, and that's that's going to tie into our trauma background, and all kinds of stuff, right? So it's a perfect example of how we're not going to serve ourselves by seeing through this siloed separate lens anymore. And we know it's not how the body works. We know that now.
It's not how the body works. To bring it back to the safety in the space, just, someone would say, this is too much. I can't be walking on eggshells around people and just wanting to create safe, being worried about what I say might, either offend or create a stress response to someone, or any of those things. What do you say to that? And I'm saying this, and I'm feeling my muscle tighten. But I'll let you respond before I respond.
Yeah. Well, I think probably we're talking about Well, one, I would be curious about how embodied that person is. You know, like, are they able to drop into their own system and their own body and like check in with what their system is doing and kind of honor that? And so I think that's really the first step, because I think what you're talking about is, you know, the next step is then sort of living with a commitment to honoring all nervous systems and making space for all nervous systems and wanting to provide safety to all nervous systems and all interactions we have. But we can't do that unless we're doing that checking in first. And so that person might not be ready for that type of commitment and the work that it takes to kind of get there, I think. Because it's not about, you know, it's not about catering, or when we come at a place of, well, I don't want to have to walk on eggshells, blah, 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 then we're making a judgment about whether that person's experience is valid or not, based on what our own limited experience. We can't do that. That's not how the world works. You know, we curiosity and space for everybody's nervous system to operate the way it is and honor it no matter how it shows up. That's where we need to get to.
And
Yeah.
as you're talking, I'm thinking about a topic that we've talked a lot about in the training and the training team is the rupture and repair. I think
Yeah.
we're so much kind of afraid and stressed about creating a rupture, and the focus is on avoiding rupture, which is impossible,
Right.
in any context, in any relationship, and missing the bigger, much needed conversation of how do we create repair.
That's
So
so funny. You're probably right. We're spending all this time and energy avoiding rupture and then being unwilling to name it or stop when we do cause a rupture of some sort. And just carry on.
because because if I'm stressed that now I'm self-censoring if that's not happening, but if I am thinking of like, oh, I don't want to say something that might cause something or kind of not make you feel safe in our conversation, I'm already in my I could feel just saying that I'm already in my survival response of being a kind of hyper vigilant. That's the word that I would feel, and doing that alone I think creates rupture because it does not feel safe already.
Well,
But
it sounds like that would be such a good opportunity to just narrate your own internal experience to humanize it, right? To say the words that you just said in that, you know, little dialogue to yourself, and to say them out loud to the person. Hey, I really want to create safety in this conversation, and I feel nervous that I'm going to create a rupture. And so then you're kind of naming this, it's an open invitation for repair if or when there's a rupture. You know, we've stated our commitment to we've stated our intention.
yeah, and that's of itself, again, repair is, yeah, it does happen all the time. We are in a continuous rupture and hopefully repair. And I know that for many people they don't experience that repair in everything, but even there are the simple rupture that happens in life. But before we kind of go in more into that, I wanted also bring to mind from your also clinical experience. We've heard, Deb talk about it many times about individuals who don't even know, they don't have an experience of what safety is because of trauma, because of life circumstances, because of everything. And they might have no clue what safety means.
Yeah. Is there a specific question in there,
No,
or is that just a lead into
just a lead? And I don't want, it's not about how do you deal with that, but how do you see it in our attempts as professionals, or just in any relationships, just to get that understanding of, oh, there are people who they don't recognize or don't feel the same thing that I'm feeling right now.
Yeah. Yeah, God, that's so hard, right? When you're navigating the world with a nervous system that is activated all the time, because that was what was needed at some point.
Mm.
That is big, right? So I think that in the therapy space, it's such a wonderful, if the therapist is doing their work and shows up with that regulated nervous system and awareness, then we've got this opportunity to just start by like setting the stage, creating a space where no matter what the level of activation that client is in or what they bring through the door, your nervous system is steady.
Mm.
And, you know, we do have to match a bit to resonate, because it would be a rupture in and of itself. The client was high activated and sympathetic, and I was, you know, really chill. That's not going to feel good to their nervous system. But for the most part, as long as I'm in that ventral space, then that's the first thing we do. And then, you know, the power of naming the little micro moments that we might catch. And so this is where this tracking is really important. Noticing eye contact, noticing body language, noticing shifts in posture, noticing breath changes, noticing skin tone changes. All these things are kind of showing us where our client is physiologically and what's happening, and when there might be a shift into some more regulation. And yeah, the clients who don't have a lot of opportunities to not be in survival state, this is a great, at least they've got one opportunity during the week where their system can take in the cues of safety. And this is, I guess, where that comes in, right? We get explicit about what are the cues of safety, what are the cues of danger, what is your system responding to? Because the more we can say, well, the cues of danger are, I don't know, I'm kind of tired. Okay, great. What are the cues of safety? And then you can rattle off a bunch. It's going to start shifting and changing and allowing the system, I think, to expand with some more regulation as we re-teach the nervous system what's needed moment to moment.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
and I'm thinking of it also in terms of, you know, social relationship, or, you know, parent relationship, or any of those relationships that are, the other person might be on, their norm is a survival state. And yeah,
Yeah,
for
right.
for there is that type of clash that
Mm.
happens when, you know, and I call them, you know, people who can't be happy even in happy occasions, because there's a big kind of ventral kind of
Mm.
excitement even, and their nervous system, because it's so used to being on
Yeah,
survival.
excitement feels very dangerous. Yeah.
Exactly. That's the thing, you know, excitement. And that took me, when I realized that excitement could be
Mm.
a cue of danger, I
Yeah.
looked back on a lot of things that happens, like, oh, because we think that, you know, oh, it's a happy occasion, why aren't you happy?
Yeah.
And
Right.
that is really difficult thing to do, but
Yeah, ventral itself, whether it's like the elevated ventral, you know, happy, excited,
Mm.
passionate, driven, whatever it is, or just like really kind of more calm, e- either of those could be a cue of danger to somebody. Because, I mean, if we were, it doesn't take too many times for our nervous system to learn that if we're in ventral and we let our guard down and then harm is done, it probably isn't a good idea to do that, right? So our system will shape up, and just being in ventral can be a cue of danger to the system that it needs to kick in.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
I feel, looking at the world from the polyvagal lens, and how the
Yeah.
nervous system really helped me understand what other people are going through, because it's very easy to get into that vicious cycle of, like, I
Mhm.
noticed that there's something not right, so I'm again calling judgment of, oh, that person can't be happy, they're just,
Yeah.
they're wanna, and usually I have those people in my life of, like, they want to find the smallest thing, and that's what our nervous system does, detect, you know,
Mhm.
clues of danger, and kind of create more story, because I'm quite wanting to
Yeah.
validate that response in me, that there is something in the environment that it's not working. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, it's such a so let me kind of work, coming to a the end of our conversation, and maybe I'll ask you a more personal question. You can, how did polyvagal kind of change the way you do small things, not your clinical practice,
Yeah.
your small things in life and how you relate to yourself and others?
Oh man.
I wasn't planning on asking that question. It just popped up.
It's a great question. I mean, I think living in a way that honors the nervous system means a lot. I mean, it really means being super conscious and aware of what it is we're doing and why, and living with more intentionality. For me, that's been the biggest shift, is living with so much more intentionality of what am I doing? How is it affecting my nervous system? Is it resourceful, or is it, I don't know, indulging a dorsal state, right? So just checking in to what it is I'm engaging in and what I'm choosing or who I'm choosing. That certainly is a big area of, who is in the circle, who, like, how does my nervous system respond to everybody? And how, relationships shift and change the more you honor your nervous system. And then you, as Deb says in some of her trainings, like, you start seeking out regulated nervous systems, the more regulated you find yourself being. And so, and then that empathy piece too, I think, yeah, this is a big, I actually had a client kind of land on this light bulb moment when we were talking about, I don't know, something through the lens of polyvagal. And he said, this is like the key to empathy, isn't it? I was like, yes, that is it. Yes, it is the key to it. Absolutely is.
It's a key to empathy and a door to compassion, really, because that for me is that, like, oh, self-compassion, more like, oh, so this is what happened internally with my system, and this is what the story, the behavior that followed. It's interesting now looking at when I first met my husband. That was over 20 years ago. And there was this kind of a recognition of something. It wasn't love at first sight. It wasn't any of that. And now when I look at it, when I remember it back, it's like, oh, nervous system, like, yes, my nervous system kind of felt safe in his presence, which is, even with everything is, when whatever happens in life, I feel like, oh, this is a system I can come back to, even, not so much when I'm activated.
I mean, we all get activated. We do.
So it's that feeling when you say how we choose people and who we want to be around.
And then for the people who are in our lives, I think that aren't on the same, place in the path with us, or aren't, maybe are a little harder to kind of connect with, is maybe a nice way to say it for a lot of people. The empathy is then what allows us to, like, make space for everybody is on their journey wherever they are. They don't have to be anywhere on their journey. They get to be exactly where they are. And we can make space for that. And what do I need to do to maintain my regulation in their presence? If it's somebody, that's in the world, you can't just kind of walk away from or don't want to walk away from, right? So that the nervous system lens of empathy is huge in that, because then we can find some connection if we're kind of checking in with ourselves and knowing, like, how do I stay safe with this person?
Yeah, absolutely. It's our day-to-day, everyday relationships. And I remember asking Dr. Porges about how polyvagal changed him, or what did he learn from polyvagal, and he talked about his kids. That's, it's our, I think, the biggest reward for me, and that's what makes me love this work.
That has changed the relationship with your kids.
Yes. And it's, and talks about how we deal with our people who are closest to us, who are we love, and we can embrace and accept, and how, it's those little things, which are not so little, really.
No,
that's I feel that the theory and Deb's amazing work is quite tangible in everyone's life who comes into contact with it, it's like, yes, this is what gets me all excited. Courtney, I'm so happy about that this happened. It's been on my mind for a while. I'm glad that we made it happen.
Yeah, I feel like we could just keep on talking for hours if we
Yes.
had the space.
Yeah. Anything you would like to add at the end, maybe about your work, about the foundation training?
Yeah, I guess if I've got a website which is Modern Mind and Heart. That's the name of the practice, and mostly psychotherapy, but speaking training, stuff like that, and like supervision groups for clinicians or consultation groups for clinicians. So anybody's welcome to jump on there and sign up for the newsletter. That is, one day I'll get pretty consistent with it. I know one has gone out, so we'll see when the next one goes out. But otherwise, yeah, Deb's foundations training is always ongoing, on the loop. There's several cohorts every year, and then yeah, I don't know. Just you can probably the best place is just to check for my stuff, my site of where I'll be next.
Yeah, I'll add the link to that. Thank you, Courtney.
Thanks so much, Manal.
Yes.